managed to say, oh, as you told me, President, you told me you were backing NATO 100%, but we haven't heard him say this.
And let's move on to NATO, because a lot of the analysts are saying that was perhaps the most important thing that was said. The Daily Telegraph, with the headline there, hand in hand, the happy couple. Again, the hand-holding has it. But just towards the end of the article there, that note that Theresa May said, Donald Trump had said,
yes,
he was 100% behind NATO. And that whole NATO issue has been very much a hot potato.
Yeah, so he gave an interview to Michael Gove in The Times, I don't know if you remember, a couple of weeks ago, in which he said that NATO is, quote, obsolete, which is picking up on a theme that he ran with very strongly in his campaign, which is that they don't basically pay for the countries in NATO don't pay enough for their own defence. Theresa May, as you say, has gone there and said in this press conference that you agreed in our previous meeting that you agreed that you're backing NATO 100%, but he didn't say that himself. These words didn't come out of the mouth of the President of the United States. He had every opportunity to say, yes, I agree with you, I said that, but he didn't say that. So I think there's a degree of false comfort being drawn from this idea that the US President backs NATO 100% because he didn't say it.
But earlier on, we had a British-based Republican former advisor who was saying, do you not think that they discussed who was going to say what before they walked out there? That was her view, that it was all carefully stage managed.
Well, I mean, it looked quite awkward. She was really walking on eggshells, and of course anybody in her shoes would. But with Donald Trump, the problem is you don't believe anything he says.
I'm getting the feeling neither of you are huge fans at this point. Let me put it to you, if other European leaders had been offered to go over first, they would have gone.
Well, look, it didn't happen. I'm not sure Angela Merkel actually would, she doesn't feel desperate. She doesn't act as if she's desperate, and she's not desperate, and she will be on the phone to him tomorrow, and so will President François Hollande, so will Vladimir Putin. And I do hope, that they actually don't rush to Washington.
They will, along with other world leaders, be slightly heartened to hear that 100% support for Brexit, for NATO.
Yeah, well, 100% support for Brexit as well, of course. But yes, I mean, Donald Trump, it cannot be stressed, this is not a normal presidency. The way he conducts himself, the people who he's appointed, the whole setup is not typical. And we simply do not know at this stage what a commitment from Donald Trump to something like NATO or something like a Mexican wall, whether this means anything. Can we trust what he says? Does he even believe or understand what he's saying?
Oh, we can talk about torture, because during the press conference he said, well, I've appointed somebody who doesn't believe in torture, so we'll go with him because, he's leading on that question. But personally, as the President of the United States, I do think that torture actually,
which is a remarkable
which is something that we've never heard, So that's why he's not a normal president, and it's very difficult to judge him by what he says.
Yes.
But playing devil's advocate again, we're always criticising politicians for evading or not giving their honest opinion. I mean, you could argue, well, at least he was being honest about it.
Well, yes, I suppose if you wanted to find something positive to say,
I'm going to struggle with it, aren't I, with you too, to try and get that.
But it's frightening times. I mean, it's almost comic, a lot of what's going on at the moment, but it's also incredibly serious at the same time.
And quite sad to see Britain playing that card, because it might really not get where they want it to.
All right, well, time will tell on that. Let's stay with the same story, but a different angle to it, and moving to the Financial Times. And again, we've got the hand-holding, so I almost won't bother to say it. Trump hands May the promise of a stronger special relationship. But in the Financial Times as well, talk about Russia. Now, there's to be a phone call, isn't there, tomorrow between Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump. I'd love to be a fly on the wall.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure other people will be listening in if the Russian Secret Service's reputation is anything to go by. This is one of the key relationships. I mean, people talk about Britain and US, but Russia and the US, Russia and Trump, given all the rumours and the innuendo and insinuations about what compromat, remember that phrase, what they might have on Donald Trump himself personally. how is he going to behave towards Russia? If he is friendly towards them, that will only add to the sense that he is somehow compromised. But he didn't shy away from this very interesting and quite worrying line that he's had, which is that I don't know Vladimir Putin. I want to have a good relationship with him. When the American military and diplomatic community are very clear that Russia is not a friend of the United States. It is a hostile power, and that they think there are grave dangers in getting too close to Russia.
It's like torture. The president disagrees with his generals.
The big question tomorrow is going to be sanctions, isn't it? And to be fair to Theresa May today, I think she did say we are sticking with them. Britain believes in sanctions.
She sort of held her ground, but she, yesterday in Philadelphia, she was also saying, well, we should have a new relationship with Russia. And it's actually the same sound coming from presidential hopeful in France. If François Fillon is elected, he's very much in favor of changing completely the French foreign policy towards Russia. So it's not something that we haven't heard in different parts in Europe. So it's something that is gradually taking ground. And I see it coming with May. I mean, she's trying to hold ground to what is British foreign policy, but it's changing.
And what do you think we'll get out of that call, or what will we be told has come out of that call?
I suspect we won't be told a lot of useful information.
Except that it was tremendous and fantastic.
Well, I mean, you had the same thing with the Mexican president, with Trump relaying what happened. He said it was just a great conversation, we got on really well. Nothing of substance was reported, and I suspect it will be a while before we do know what exactly is going on between these bilateral relations between Trump and other world leaders.
And there was the quote as well, we have cancelled the appointment with the Mexican premier as well. So it was sounding as if they both decided that they weren't going to do it. Okay, now I've mentioned it. Let's get back onto it. Let's go through it in real time. Brexit. This was going to be very closely looked at, what was said at the press conference and or the rest by the European press, by the European leaders. Agnes, let me start with you. How do you think the other European leaders will be viewing what happened today?
Well, the thing is, what happened today, apart from words? I mean, Trump said it's the most wonderful thing that could happen to Britain, but in terms of trade, I mean, do we know anything in detail? No. Okay, it might be too early. It's a first visit, but his words towards the EU, calling it, I think, a consortium. I mean, he hates the organisation that is the European Union.
But will it have annoyed, angered, embittered foreign leaders, European leaders to the UK?
Yes, absolutely. There's, I mean, Article 50 hasn't been triggered, and yet Theresa May, the British Prime Minister, is running to Washington in the hope of having a trade deal with Trump. Trump says, yes, of course, we'll make business. We'll have a tremendous relationship. But it's all wind, it's all empty words. And Britain is still in the European Union, as far as we know.
But I'm sorry to push you on this. Wouldn't the other European leaders have expected it? And if it was the boot was on the other foot, they would have gone.
Well, expected a chronology, perhaps. You go after you actually do officially say, I'm leaving the European Union, and I therefore start negotiation.
Right, to do it that way, right? All right, Ben.
I think what's really interesting is that for all the hand-holding, Trump did not come out and say, we will definitely do a quick trade deal with the UK and we will start negotiating it now. That's not what Theresa May and Downing Street would have hoped to have come out of this.
Do you think that realistically, though, he might have said something like that?
With Trump, of course he might have done it. He may have had to row back on it, but he could have said it. I think someone has got to him and said, look, don't go too far on this because we have to get this through Congress. We have to hammer out the details. We have to speak to the lobbyists in the US about what the terms of this are going to be. So just row back a bit. And I think it's quite interesting. They would have loved to be able to say, Trump says we will definitely do trade deal. Right. They didn't get that headline.
Okay. And of course now with regard to the fact that in a sense he doesn't make the laws, got to go through Congress, and of course the British can't start proper trade talks until that period's finished. In a sense, a lot of this was for show anyway.
Well, of course. I mean, it's all about holding hands, And, well, I do hope he's not going to try holding hands with the Queen. Hopefully he will be briefed on that. I mean, this is a pantomime. Isn't it? I mean, that's all you get on every single British newspaper.
I was going to say the ministers would be delighted reading and seeing it on so prominently everywhere.
Well, some will be, and some, I suspect, will share my view that there's a bit of a hostage to fortune, perhaps a very large hostage to fortune. If Trump goes down in flames, which is certainly not inconceivable given his erratic behaviour in this first week, this could look really bad. Really bad.
I don't think Angela Merkel would have held hands with Donald Trump.
Well, we don't quite. It was interesting as they were walking between the pillars. Those pillars hid quite a lot. We don't know who grabbed whose hand.
We don't know who initiated it.
No,
quite.
It's like playground, isn't it? OK. And the Telegraph, going back to the Telegraph as well, has got quite an interesting angle on that. Inside and on page 5, Prince Charles talking about Brexit, saying it's being given almost obsession status over other important topics, more particularly Christian persecution.
Yeah, so he took part in this campaign, or rather gave his voice to this campaign about persecution in the Middle East of Christians, and he was very frustrated, it seems, according to this report, which seems pretty well sourced, that this wasn't picked up by the media. And Prince Charles apparently blames Brexit for the reason it didn't get picked up, because everyone's, quotes, obsessed with Brexit. I think it's probably more that the media is obsessed with Brexit rather than the British people. But well, one thing you can say is he certainly righted that wrong, because now it's in the media and the report is being talked about and he's got some exposure for it. So good for him in that sense.
It's a little talked about subject, yeah, persecutions of Christians, and it's been so for years now. So, I mean, you know, good on him to actually push it almost to the front page.
But just briefly, if you would, this is just the start, isn't it, Odd? This, you know, the start of constant headlines about Brexit over the next 2 or so years.
Oh yeah, well, we've had it for long enough, and it's going to go on till as far as the eye can see.
And what next with the Trump-Britain relationship? Can we? Obviously, you two are deeply pessimistic about it, but can you see the wheels falling off in the next few days or weeks?
Bewildered, you know. I mean, it's a bit like Brexit. It's almost worse than Brexit. Because it concentrates all your attention. So if only we could focus on something else. All
right, well, there we must leave it. Thank you very much indeed. Don't forget, of course, you can see the front pages of the papers online on the BBC News website. It's all there for you 7 days a week at bbc.co.uk/papers. And if you missed the programme any evening, you can watch it later on BBC iPlayer. Big thank you to Agnes and to Ben. Goodbye.